you been infected since washing hands?
Then I washed my hands again.
Oh.
Which, that is what it is.
I was going to ask about this.
There's some, I know of at least
This the same one?
one case of someone
Thank you.
lives alone.
Thank you.
Yeah. And like washing hands all the time in the apartment.
Yeah.
And then like, I mean, just innocently saying that. And then I checked in and I said, wait, is this the situation? Like, I said, you need to.
Fear can bring about some OCD.
Yeah, stop. Yeah. I mean, for real, I saw an article like that. Warning, like, it could trigger OCD. And so again, like, have healthy fear, try to figure out when that line, you're getting too close to that line. I mean, I found myself, also not to that dangerous level, like going, wait, I'm in the house.
I even brought this one
Yes, good.
with all my pictures.
We might have to answer some questions.
Yes.
Fabiola, can you remind Trinley to wash his hands when he's in? So Phowa, it means to go. It means to, in fact, even transfer. It's already a fancier translation. So often it's the transference of consciousness, our subtitle of this program, right? Transference of consciousness at the time of death. But Phowa, the word itself, means to go. So in that sense, to transfer, to go from one place to another place. If we look at the older texts, before what we now call Phowa has become a common practice. Yeah? If we look at older texts, this term turns up most frequently in the context of speaking about when you die and you go from this to the next life. They use the word Phowa. When you die and you go from this to the next life, it's called Phowa. Yeah, it says when you are going to Phowa, when you are going to transition, when you are going to transfer from this to the next life. So that's the most kind of basic meaning of the word Phowa. Here, Phowa, what we're talking about then here is to train ourselves so that when that time comes, which of course it will come, we know where to transfer to. We know how to go, and we know where to go. So in this sense then, Phowa has become a set of trainings and practices for arriving at a destination that is considered desirable. So what is this destination? In this tradition, we call it the Pure Land of Great Bliss of Buddha Amitabha. Buddha Amitabha is the Buddha of infinite light and life. Sometimes he is called Amitabha in Sanskrit. Sometimes he is called Amitayus in Sanskrit. Amitayus is infinite or boundless life. Amitabha is boundless light. So these two names are interchangeable in the sutras. In the East Asian traditions, so Korea, Japan, China, they have elaborated on this name, these two names, Amitabha and Amitayus. I have not seen this explicitly elaborated in the Tibetan Himalayan traditions, but we can learn something from the East Asian traditions. So they say that when he is called Amitabha, infinite light, this is the wisdom aspect. This is the wisdom aspect that is being emphasized, highlighted. When he is called Amitayus, infinite life, this is the compassionate aspect that is being emphasized. And so the reason why this Buddha has infinite or boundless life is so that his guidance will be perpetually available to those that are ready to be guided out of confusion and suffering. Infinite light, boundless light, illuminates at all times. So when we say Amitabha, we can understand these two aspects. Amitabha, for many Buddhists, especially Buddhists all across most of Asia, those who follow the Mahayana tradition, of which Vajrayana is part of the Mahayana, then Amitabha is universally recognized as this Buddha that resides, it is said in the text, in the western direction. So western direction. Now, for us, we should know this. Then we can also think, like, just as when I talked about Parnashabari and Tara, right? That yes, they are embodied in specific cases. Like in ancient India, that goddess of that tribe that is reputed to have the power to prevent infectious diseases and to heal infectious diseases. In the presence of medicine women everywhere and anywhere, we can say that principle is active, is at work. So just like in that case, there is a principle that is universal, that cuts, that is not limited to this or that tradition. So then Amitabha, as a principle, also transcends that particular set of mythology, that particular set of religious symbol that Asian Buddhists, many Asian Buddhists directly connect with when you tell them Amitabha. So for us, I think, for our practice of this particular set of trainings called Phowa, we need to think about how it might work for us. Because then the gist of this practice is to direct the technical language is to transfer or to direct your consciousness at the time of death to Amitabha's Pure Land. To direct your consciousness to Amitabha's Pure Land at the time of death. Okay, let's translate that to normal talk, what would that be? Let's translate that to normal talk.
Like a heaven? Or no?
You can keep Amitabha.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to think of that at that time?
No. No, normal talk, okay. To transfer your consciousness at the time of death to Amitabha's Pure Land. Okay, you can keep death, I'll give you hints. You can keep death, you can keep Amitabha's Pure Land.
Follow the light.
To follow the light.
Sure.
And even more basic than follow the light. Follow that is pretty good. What?
To go there when you die?
Yeah, to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. Yeah. To go to Amitabha's Pure Land. To go to Amitabha's Pure Land. Because sometimes, transfer consciousness. Because we don't typically think I am consciousness. We typically think I am blah blah blah. Then you think, oh, at death, some of Han is going to be somewhere else, and then the consciousness of Han is being transferred. And I think we miss a crucial piece. Yeah? If we get too technical and we say transferring consciousness at the time of death, but it's really how to get to Amitabha's Pure Land. And then if you want to translate it to even more common, it's like how to get to heaven. But then of course, with that you're like, wait a minute, I thought I left that religion. You're like, and it's like, guess what? It all comes back to the same thing. You're like, what? So better I make it explicit now until, at the end of this weekend or maybe even years later, you're like, wait a minute.
I think the Muslims have it too.
Have what?
Follow Allah, Allah's.
Yeah, but I don't think we have any, ex-Muslims here. All religions, have this notion of going to a happy place after this, I would say, yeah, maybe, who knows, right? It's hard to say. But I want to say this too, like superficially, of course, it's very similar. But I'm not going to tell you it is or it is not. All I will suggest to you, a plea to you is, let's see what this is. Let's see what this is. So I would say then, on the outer layer of this practice, this set of teachings and all of this, it sounds like that. How to go to a happy place after here. But there are layers of this practice that is focused on something else. Which is, in the end, it is about how do we resolve this question of birth and death and settle it so that our mind is settled, our hearts are settled. Because death is something that triggers us. I mean, look at right now. Because death is something that triggers us. Of course, Vajrayana will have a hook waiting there. Of course, Vajrayana is going to have a hook waiting there. This is like, you can catch a lot of fish here. So Vajrayana has this hook and say, ooh, yeah, death is really, really scary. But we can give you a very reliable visa, a passage, a secure document for safe passage. Safe passage at this time where we are so triggered and they're so concerned. I would say the essence of the Phowa practice is about settling the heart. Because all our other fears that we have in our daily life, whether exaggerated or not exaggerated, according to this understanding, is based on not having settled the main issue of life and death. Which at this point it is death, because we're already in life. But because we don't understand life, then we fear death. Because we don't understand life, so then we are entangled by this notion of life. Normally we say attached. That word, I think, overly used and imprecise. So I suggest we look at it as we become entangled with this notion of life. It's not even with life itself. It's with the notions, the concepts, the ideas, the fears and the hopes that we have that are completely wrapped up with this thing that we call life. Because of that. Because of not having settled that question, then we fear death. And what is death? Again, conceptually, you could say, oh, I don't fear death. But then when you survey and look around, in nooks and corners of your own heart, you have this fear, you have that fear, that fear, that fear. They are all related to the fear of death. Why? Death, the biological death, the death that, that is being reported, how many cases of death? What's behind that is the loss of what we are used to. Right? I mean, the death that results in obituaries written and read is the biggest version of the loss of what we are used to. Including the loss of, sometimes, the craziness that we have gotten used to. Even that can trigger, like, oh. So the fear of failure, the fear of succeeding, the fear of being noticed, the fear of not being noticed, the fear of having, the fear of not having, the fear of being recognized, the fear of being not recognized, all those are related to the final fear of death, which is the fear of, which is the fear that arises from not having settled this question of birth and death. So for that, in order for Phowa to work to be successful, it is in fact not in the technical details of Phowa practice, which there is. But if we think that it is in the technical details of Phowa and try to manipulate ourselves into the Pure Land, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. So first, we need to change our attitude, change our understanding. Then from there, the technique is simple. It's sort of like, like you say, I want to go, I want to go, I want to go. Right? I want to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere, I want to go somewhere. But you don't really mean it. We all have that experience, Like we want to go somewhere, whether it's a vacation or a change of circumstances in our life. You know, I need to leave this relationship. I need to leave this job. I need to leave this town. I need to leave this whatever, right? We are the human condition is that we are stuck with I want to go, but I don't want to go. So Phowa, if you are only focused on, the technique, that's like making all kinds of plans to go somewhere, to change your job, to change your life, to change your situation, to change your partner, to change whatever, right? But at the same time, the resolve is not really there. It's only every now and then when things get inconvenient, when things get, uncomfortable, you say, I'm going to move, right? I'm going to move to Canada. That season is coming soon for some of us. I'm moving to Canada. So the Canadians will build a wall soon. Stay on that side, don't come. You have to pass the politeness test before they'll let you in. After my first visit to Mexico recently, I said, my phrase will be like, I'm moving to Mexico. So we need to really, make this resolve, strengthen this resolve of going. So there are so many ways to strengthen this resolve. There are pushing and pulling methods to strengthen this resolve. Pushing meaning we're not happy with certain circumstances that we are in. Pulling, we're attracted to. So you can make use of both pushing and pulling factors to help in this resolve and say, yep, time to go. Then specific to this practice, they also say, you have to simultaneously appreciate and value and take advantage of what you have now in this life. They even warn, using Phowa to escape from this life will result in rebirth in the lower realms. Because they say, then you are killing yourself. Now, I don't know how literally we need to take this, because I don't know how many of us have the ability to really Phowa ourselves to the next life. But I think on the level of not being literal, we can learn a lot about this, what it's saying, which is you cannot use Phowa or related teachings and practices to quote-unquote kill yourself in this life. You have to turn up in this life. We don't turn up in this life because under the power of confusion, every time we turn up, we can get slapped in the face. So we retreat, right? And according to the Buddha, that is an escape that will never free you. But it's quite understandable because each time we try to turn up, we get slapped in the face. Sometimes we even get punched in the face. But the solution is not to dig ourselves into some hole and think, oh, I'm now safe. According to the Buddha, the solution is turn up, but turn up with wisdom. Turn up with understanding. Then when you turn up, you can do a lot of good to yourself and to others. And when you turn up, guided with wisdom, guided with compassion, you can do a lot of good. So the Phowa teaching said, anyone who engages in Phowa and kind of speeds up their death is committing a non-virtue. It says, you have to, it even says, you have to use all other means first. Do not let this life end. So often, Phowa, like during the 12-year transmission, right? See, the first thing is, let's prevent the outbreak of infectious diseases so that people don't die. But everyone's coming to figure out how to get to the good place when you die. You see? But the first thing is, prevent infectious diseases. It's not like, yay, how many can die this time so that, you can get there sooner. No. Precious human life. That's really. And so again, I think we don't need to take it even to that literally. In fact, for most of us, that's not that relevant. Yeah? Most of us. But what is relevant is we relate to Dharma not as an escape for not turning up in life. We need to turn up. We need to occupy our throne. We need to be enthroned as Buddhists. There's a lot of talk in Tibetan Buddhism about tukus, reincarnate lamas, and they are enthroned. You need to enthrone yourself as a tuku. But please don't start adding that to your name and create a new profile. I don't mean that. But we need to enthrone ourselves as tuku, as in the Nirmanakaya of Buddhists. Buddhists now, you will need to take our position as Buddhists, turn up in life. Even as we also train to know when the time comes, we can go to the right place. So, Phowa training in the end is training, I would say, to turn up, not to go anywhere. Phowa training is the training to turn up. So in the Zen tradition it says, when you're eating, eat. When you're resting, rest. That's turning up. When you are living, live. When you are dying, die. Right now, we don't know how to live. Therefore, we don't know how to die. If life is unsatisfactory, wait till death comes. It's also going to be not up to expectations. But if life is satisfactory, if we can figure out how to live life and be really like, this is good. I am settled now. Then when death comes, it will also be satisfactory. Good death. Good life, good death. Good death, good life. So you can approach it from both directions. But if you approach like practices for how to have a good death, in a way that you find that you are now escaping life, then you should know, maybe something went wrong there now. So this should mutually reinforce each other. So for Phowa to be successful, quote unquote, we need to resolve, I am not going to be entangled. Usually translated as I'm not going to be attached. That's a bad word. Attached. No attachment, no attachment. No. Don't be entangled. Don't get yourself into entanglements. Disentangle. Disentangle. that, we will begin with one of the basic, we will look first at a basic source of the Buddha's teachings, which is found in the early scriptures. Now we have this scripture translated from the Pali language. Pali and Sanskrit are the two Indian languages that teachings of the Buddha were recorded in. In the Mahayana tradition, they will say Sanskrit is the original. In the Theravada cultures, it will say Pali. And, you know, we don't need to get into all these debates as to which language. But suffice to say that right now, the particular text that I'm using, is something that is translated from the Pali. But I'm also sure it exists in Sanskrit. But because the Sanskrit texts did not survive intact in Sanskrit, only parts of it survived. Mainly because Sanskrit speaking or Sanskrit writing Buddhist communities died out in India. So then it's not preserved in that language. Whereas Pali speaking, Pali literate cultures continued from the early period till today. So we have intact the Pali collection of the Buddhist teachings. The Sanskrit collection, I would say 90% has been translated into other classical language like classical Chinese, classical Tibetan. But anyway, this teaching that the Buddha gave is known as the Abhaya Sutta. The Abhaya Sutta. For those of you who are watching on the internet, on Facebook, if you want to pull up this text, you can Google Abhaya Sutta, Abhaya, 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 Abhaya Sutta, Sutta, Abhaya Sutta, and you can pull up this text on the internet easily. Particularly, I'm using the translation that is found on this website, a rich resource for the Pali texts, translations of Pali texts, as well as teachings from teachers of the forest tradition in Thailand. And this website is Dhamma Talks, DHAMMA talks.org. This website used to be known as a different, earlier incarnation, earlier life, access to insight. And now it's called Dhamma Talks.org. DHAMMA so we're using that translation. So Abhaya Sutta is the discourse on the discourse, as in the teaching of the Buddha, on being fearless. So this fear that we're talking about here is the unhealthy kind of fear, the kind of fear that is driven by confusion, and therefore the consequence of that kind of fear is that it will lead us to even more suffering. So this is a discourse that the Buddha talked about. Fear and fearlessness. And specifically, it is actually the fear of death. So it's a good place for us to start. Joe, maybe you can read a little bit. I'll tell you when to pause. Then I have an excuse to shut up and rest my throat.
Then Janusani, the Brahmin, went to the Blessed One, and on arrival exchanged courteous greetings with him. After an exchange of friendly greetings and courtesies, he sat to one side. As he was sitting there, he said to the Blessed One, I am of the view and opinion that there is no one who, subject to death, is not afraid or in terror of death.
Thank you. Pause first. So here is Janusoni speaking on behalf of all of us. Very honest statement. And if we are honest, we will all say the same. But when we are sophisticated and educated and overread, we're like, no. The Janusani is speaking right from the heart, being vulnerable and saying, we all fear death, and I can't see anyone who is not afraid. And I think that's the first one we need to start with. If you think you are not, maybe you are not, but chances are you just have fancy ways that you have, kind of hide yourself away from it. And you don't want to wait until the moment comes. Because at that moment, whatever device that you think you have, whatever that you think, that you are so settled on, it's potentially, it will all come rushing. Then at that point, it's too late. It's easy to feel very good with the world. I'm at ease, I'm at peace, when we live in conditions that are, relative to many parts of the world, it's a cushy life here. I mean, I travel. I have family in Asia. I find it, I every time I go to Asia, then I come back and say, oh, it's so easier to practice Dharma in the West. Yeah, because everything is, pretty comfortable here. And every time I go to like some place that I find challenging, and I have to confess, for me, is usually like, somewhere in India. That's when I go, gosh, I'm a wimp. Dharma is not working with that. When I'm in like India, I'm like, oh. Then I look at people in India, it's like, oh, these are real practitioners. They're figured out, because everything is from our what we're used to, everything is so chaotic there. Everything is so uncertain there. And everything is not what it seems to be. Then we get to some place like that. That's like when the real test of is the Dharma present or not. So travel actually is a good test. And so I've taken people on going away to other places, and you can see how things trigger them. So that's a kind of Phowa, going somewhere, and you get triggered because things are not in control anymore. Get triggered. Once in a while, very surprisingly, someone who has not done travel much, or and they go and they're perfectly fine, and they're like, okay, that's pretty good. And then, and so when people go with me, I think one of the clearest things is like they feel sometimes like, what's happening? What are we doing? And this is like after you just told them what is going to happen, But it's very understandable because, the sophisticated mind is useless now. The heart has taken over. Never mind, you just said, okay, tomorrow or later today we're going to do X, Y, Z, whatever, The educated, intelligent, sophisticated mind, has been thrown apart because everything is just so uncertain, unfamiliar. So in that sense, even if you successfully get, so to say, to Amitabha's Pure Land, you might be, oh, what's going on? What's going on? Who are you? I'm Amitabha. No, I don't think so.
That's funny.
So elsewhere in the teachings it says, Pamodrupa, some of you know this name. Pamodrupa, he says, he where he lives, he attracted a lot of students that trained with him from all over the known Tibetan world of his time. He lived in the 10th, 11th century. He said something like, he said, on some days, this is the golden ground of Amitabha's Pure Land, something like that. On other days, this is the molten lava of the hell realms. Molten lava is referring to how classic Buddhist descriptions of the hell realms is that the ground is molten lava. Also, classic descriptions of Amitabha's Pure Land is that it's the ground apparently is made from gold. So farmers are out of luck. I joke about how, in the Amitabha's Pure Land, people would trade dirt. Dirt will be sold by the ounce. And maybe people will tell you, don't invest in stocks, buy dirt. They don't make more dirt anymore. Because dirt will be so rare in Amitabha's Pure Land. Anyway. So here, this man, Januswani, says to Buddha, everyone fears death. So please continue.
The Blessed One said, Brahman, there are those who, subject to death, are afraid and in terror of death. And there are those who, subject to death, are not afraid or in terror of death.
Yeah, so the Buddha says, no, actually there are two types of people. And this is the good news. There are two types of people though. Those who, and both types are subject to death. And no one is not subject to death. Even Jesus has to at least die once. Even according to that story. At least have to die once, So everyone is subject to death. So that, no choice. Right? You cannot negotiate that. So death is a certainty. And then he says, but in the face of that, you can be in terror and in fear of it, or you can be free from it. And so I said, we all have to die. The only difference is, will we be dying completely broken, or are we going to die completely whole and complete? We can die broken, we can die whole. So we practice Dharma to ensure that we are living whole, we are living whole, and we are dying whole and complete. Right now, we're broken in different ways. Some days feels more broken than other days. So we use the instructions that the Buddha has given us to become whole and complete again. This is the Mahayana view, which is that, in fact, we are innately Buddhas. In the higher Mahayana teachings, it says, this very ground that I'm standing on is already the Pure Land of Amitabha. But right now, of course, rarely, if ever, do I experience it that way. And therefore, there's the hook of, well, when you need to go somewhere, let's ensure that we go to where we belong, which is where we have never left in the first place, which is this very ground that we are standing on, is the Pure Land of Amitabha already. Again, in the East Asian tradition, in the Zen tradition, there's a student asking the master, can you show me the Pure Land of Amitabha? And the master said, first show me the defiled land of confusion. Right? What does that mean? We'll see. But already you have some sense of, right, what is being pointed out there, which is, it's all how you experience what's going on here. So a student decided to modify the question. He said, okay, how about, can you show me how to be free? And the teacher said, can you show me how you got bound in the first place? So actually Buddha's approach is this. That's why it's the Four Noble Truths doesn't begin with, there is happiness. He says, there is suffering. There is dukkha. And people who don't understand that says, so negative, so pessimistic. What a party pooper. And even some Buddhists might not say that, but they will only quickly say, oh, there is suffering. Okay, now, let's talk about Pure Land. Let's go to bliss. So many, especially people, I think, attracted to Tibetan Buddhism, some, not all, always about bliss, great bliss, and then, there is like, these fancy high teachings, how to generate bliss. Sign me up, Here later we'll look how Jiden Sungben, founder of Drigum Kagyu, he said many things that are just like, he said, you think those methods to produce bliss is very special, very amazing. He said, I tell you, the most profound way to produce bliss are the teachings that tells us to abstain from the 10 non-virtues. Not very sexy at all. But if you really understand what the Buddha taught, you're not going to get bliss by controlling your breath, controlling your diet, all that stuff. If you continue to create non-virtue. Elsewhere the Buddha said, Jiden Sungden, he points out, he says, these people, they talk about this technique, that technique, this technique, that technique, this is so amazing, this is so profound, this is so special. And he said, no. The basic thing that you don't understand yet, that is most profound. Profoundly understand that, everything just falls into place very easily. This is not to say, like those practices, the high teachings and techniques have no place. It's just saying that they will fall into place when you attend to the fundamentals. So the fundamental is to start with, there is suffering, there is dukkha. That's why the Buddha starts there. Why? So it's also sometimes, people say, I already know what suffering is. Tell me something else. Tell me how to end it. Actually, here it says, when we really understand dukkha, we don't even need to learn how to be free from dukkha. when we really understand dukkha, we don't even need to really learn how to be free from dukkha, how to be free from suffering. It's only because we don't know, we don't understand dukkha. That's the only reason we still embrace it and cannot let go of it. So here, Buddha addresses this problem of dukkha in the context of death and the fear that it seems to unleash on everyone. So continue.
And who is the person who, subject to death, is afraid and in terror of death? There is the case of the person who has not abandoned passion, desire, fondness, thirst, fever, and craving for sensuality. Then he comes down with a serious disease. As he comes down with a serious disease, the thought occurs to him, "Oh, those beloved sensual pleasures will be taken from me, and I will be taken from them." He grieves and is tormented, weeps, beats his breast, and grows delirious. This is a person who, subject to death, is afraid and in terror of death. Then,
Okay, so the first one.
yeah,
So he's going to talk about four situations, four types. So the first one is the person who has not abandoned passion, desire, fondness, thirst, fever, and craving for sensuality. All of us, in different degrees, on different days, different times of the day. Right? Here, sensuality is not even talking about, not even talking about, it's definitely talking about, but more basic than hedonists. And it can even include those who are into like torturing themselves. Because there's also people who find pleasure in punishing themselves. Even those are tethered to sensuality. More normal is tethered to what we all normally agree as pleasant sensations. But if you're tethered to sensations, in the minority of those who feel more alive, when someone's whipping them, or when they're beating themselves up, both cases, you are tethered to sensuality. And when you are tethered to sensuality, when you are bound to sensuality, then the knowledge and the suspicion and the news that, you know what, pretty soon that's not going to be available. What do?
So,
Or in the season, the word is, according to this season right now, panic. Look at the shelves. TP, right? Too soon maybe, but this is COVID-19. I said there's a TPC 20, the toilet paper crisis of 2020. Maybe in 20 years, someone will write something about the TPC 20. Panic. Actually, this is not judgment. This is, like Buddha is saying, it's how we have habitually responded to. So what he's advising, so next part, later part of this sutta, Buddha says, you can free yourself from being bound by sensuality. In other words, by identifying yourself so much with sensory experiences as who you think you are. The more you think that your sensory experiences define who you are, the more you will be at the mercy of fundamentally unstable experiences. All sensory experiences are unstable. You get that? So normally translated as without essence. And there's a lot of Buddhist technical terms, and then those of us who are, so educated in Buddhist stuff, we have turned that into another system of belief. Then we have forgotten, well, what the hell does that mean? Right?
Well,
Yeah,
we're back
you know,
on.
so sensory experiences are unstable. And if we're going to define ourselves, our existence, who I am, by relying on our sensory experiences, then you are going to be on the roller coaster all the time. Buddha is saying, you need not do that. You have a choice. If you are tethered to, if you are bound to sensory experiences as defining you, then of course you're going to fear death, because death is going to rob you from that. But if you stop or minimize or control, whatever degree we can, right? To not let our sensory experiences define who we are, then we're starting to have a handle on this. Next, let's read on.
Then there is the case of the person who has not abandoned passion, desire, fondness, thirst, fever, and craving for the body. Then he comes down with a serious disease. As he comes down with a serious disease, the thought occurs to him, "Oh, my beloved body will be taken from me, and I will be taken from my body." He grieves and is tormented, weeps, beats his breast, and grows delirious. This, too, is a person who, subject to death, is afraid and in terror of death.
Tormented, grieves, is tormented, weeps, beats his breast, and grows delirious. We all have various forms of that.
Do people used to beat their breast? What is that? Not really a Dharma question.
Not really a Dharma question,
Ping
right?
pong.
I think people do.
Yeah.
Still do?
Do people still do it?
I sometimes do when I'm happy. It's like not as a grievous thing.
I think, yeah, this beating of the breast is really, like, the heart really aches, I don't know if it's necessarily beating, but it's like, almost like wanting to numb that, yeah, and just like, doing this, not like punch,
Right.
like that,
Huh.
I think, and you see this in ritualized mourning. It is, and the ritualized mourning is probably based on observing. A ritual is always a heightened sense of doing what you normally do.
And also an expression of remorse
Uh-huh.
sometimes in Buddhism, Catholicism.
Yeah, right. So,
Like that or like heavy?
No, just.
well, it depends on how sincere you are.
Almost.
You're supposed to dress in rags and rub yourself with ashes or something.
Yeah,
Ashes.
ashes on your head.
Yeah, ashes.
Huh.
And we call those yogins, in India.
This,
Yeah.
from the previous passage, the
Uh-huh.
sensory,
Sensory.
is that also like mental?
Yeah, that's one of the 6 senses in Buddhist. Yeah, so mental too. You know. So sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and ideas. Experiencing sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and ideas. But the experience of sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, they get filtered through ideas. Yeah. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch themselves are neutral. And in fact, we say in the Buddhist theory of okay, here's a big word. Many months or years I've not been able to use this word. In Buddhist epistemology, when in my previous life, in this body, I use those words. You know. In Buddhist epistemology, the science of knowing, it says that the first 5 types of experiences, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, they are direct perception. Yeah. So then, elsewhere we also hear about like direct perception, or non-conceptual is another word. So elsewhere we think, oh, non-conceptual must be wisdom. Not necessarily. Because there is the ordinary non-conceptual, which is the eye just simply sees what it sees. But until it's filtered through concepts, it has no idea what it's actually looking at. Yeah. So it includes thoughts, emotions, ideas. The first one, sensuality. Second one, body, is, you could say, sort of a variation of the first, right? But for me here, the second one, I think of it as body, of course, is body. But here I get a sense that it's not so much talking about sensory experiences. It's more talking about mental, emotional, but the mental, emotional body that is invested in like all our plans, our ambitions, our fears and hopes related to this life that we have. This is how I'm reading this second type of being tethered to, being bound by. So maybe you are like, I don't know, like, someone like Steve Jobs or whatever, apparently doesn't care much about body, very disciplined, not a hedonist, in fact, very ascetic-like, But even that, it doesn't mean you are free yet, because you still have ambitions, plans, fears and hopes related to. Right? Even if it is, I want to save the world. Again, I want to save the world, as I said earlier. If your sense of I is very big, but you don't have wisdom, then your suffering is very big. So here, to me, what's talking about at this second one is all the hopes and fears we have associated with this life, with this body. And the hopes and fears that give rise to all our plans, our ambitions, and again here, just like the first one, it's not saying, the solution to the first problem is not to minimize or to try to cut off sensory experiences. Just like the second one is not necessarily, although to minimize helps, because if we keep thinking then the way we solve it is having more and more and more, of course we will never be free from it. But neither is it, to like say, oh, you have to stop having ambitions, you have to stop having plans. No, it's not talking about that. It's talking about be careful how, in the course of doing what is commonsensical, what is necessary, we quickly fall into an addiction to all these plans, all these ambitions, all these big ideas that we have. And so here we really need to see, how we habitually invest in this, like our identity is tethered to this life. First one, our identity is tethered to ephemeral, unstable experiences that we have. Second, this one, next one, the one we're looking at now, is our identity is tethered to, bound to our ideas of me, this life. And as long as it's tethered like that, bound like that, we're bound to suffer. When the thought arises, oh my God, I'm going to be deprived of this. This is going to be gone soon. And fear arises. This is the second time. Yes, Fabio.
I just noticed it mentions the I, right? So the I is involved there. Those beloved sensual pleasures will be taken from me, and I will be taken from them, and then the same for the body. So who's the I?
Sorry?
The I, I is like the awareness. There's like a mention to a self, and I.
Yeah. This is just the commonsensical I. That's what we think, right? Oh, my beloved body will be taken from me, and I will be taken from my body. Yeah.
Where do I go exactly? It's like there's.
Here it's not so much about going. It's just like, and then I'm going to be deprived of this.
Yeah, but there is no I.
That's a different statement. This is talking about, however Buddhist propaganda you have up in your head, that there's no I,
No, there is the concern, and I can totally
Yeah,
relate, right?
yeah.
But that is like I. So what part? I mean, just by reading that, it raises the
Yes.
question of what happens to me, to the I.
That's,
It's another layer.
what is this I, right?
Personality?
Yeah, we say I, like my body, my mind. So now there's something that possesses the body and something that possesses the mind. What is that? Blah, blah, blah. So, right? Of course, Buddha will go into that. But here, not yet that topic necessarily. Now it's just look at how, stay focused on look at how we let our passing, shifting, changing experiences, sensory experiences, go into defining who we are. And see how that is a recipe for suffering. Next, see how our concept of I is tethered to whatever notion we have about this existence, this body, this life. Is the second. Third, let's continue.
Then there is the case of the person who has not done what is good, has not done what is skillful, has not given protection to those in fear, and instead has done what is evil, savage, and cruel. Then he comes down with a serious disease. As he comes down with a serious disease, the thought occurs to him, I have not done what is good, have not done what is skillful, have not given protection to those in fear, and instead have done what is evil, savage, and cruel. To the extent that there is a destination for those who have not done what is good, have not done what is skillful, have not given protection to those in fear, and instead have done what is evil, savage, and cruel, that's where I'm headed after death.
Okay, so that's the third type. And now Buddha introduces the topic of what we call karma. Karma. That our actions have consequences. And even if we normally, because of whatever propaganda we have, meaning whatever ideology, whatever philosophy we might have, that says, there's no such thing as karma, no? Or everything is fated or whatever. But the Buddha is saying, when the time comes, when things kind of threaten what we perceive to be our life, then the quality of our actions very naturally will come and haunt us. Whatever philosophy you might have. I mean, it's good if you have, the philosophy of karma as the Buddha taught it. But then, if that's not worked into really your system, all that is going to fall away, whatever theories that you have. But very instinctively, you will have this thought, right? I have not done what is good. I have not done what is skillful. Skillful means things that are, in this context, skillful. Skillful and unskillful in the Buddha's context is what? Produces happiness is skillful. Does not produces suffering, unskillful. So, and have not given protection to those in fear. And instead have done what is evil, savage, and cruel. There is the explicit doing of what is evil, savage, and cruel, and we know that, and then we find a way to justify why that is necessary. And then there's also doing that which is cruel, evil, and savage, sometimes without knowing. And of the two, without knowing is worse, because it will continue. So we need to see this and understand. So it says, have not given protection to those in fear. Later, when he talks about those who are free from fear, when death is approaching, or when you think that death is coming, you will have no fear if you know, I have given protection to others. I have given comfort to others. I have done that which is good. I have done that which is skillful. That's the opposite of this. This is speaking to the need to really do that which is skillful, that which is good, that which protects others from fear. So this is about karma. According to the Buddha, karma is the nature of everything. Karma is the nature of everything, cause and effect. And cause and effect is unmistakable. You plant an apple seed, you will get an apple tree when all the conditions come together. You plant a mango seed, when the conditions come together, you're going to get an apple, a mango tree sprout. There is no hybrid plants in the karma universe. Okay? So there's no GMO karma. Virtue produces virtue, non-virtue produces non-virtue, or virtue produces happiness, non-virtue produces suffering. Next.
Then there is the case of the person in doubt and perplexity, who has not arrived at certainty with regard to the true Dhamma. Then he comes down with a serious disease. As he comes down with a serious disease, the thought occurs to him, how doubtful and perplexed I am. I have not arrived at any certainty with regard to the true Dhamma. He grieves and is tormented, weeps, beats his breast, and grows delirious. This, too, is a person who, subject to death, is afraid and in terror of death.
Okay. So this fourth one is, with regards to the true Dhamma. That means the true Dharma. That means Dharma is the way things are. The reality of what we are experiencing. Right now, what we are experiencing is being screened by veils. So it distorts what we are experiencing. Not recognizing that, not knowing that, not having that settled, not arriving at a stable and clear understanding of the way things are. Then, when things shift, when things fall out of place, when we are unnerved, then fear arises. But when there is certainty with regards to what the Buddha taught about the nature of suffering, the nature of freedom from suffering, then there's no fear. Or you can minimize fear, really. The unhealthy fear. The fear that leads to delirium. Or to the beating of the breast. In a way, you could say, if you get this fourth one, the other three falls in place, right? But be careful, in getting the fourth one, that is not just some intellectual occupation. Like, oh, I've read enough books. Yeah, I understand. We are too smart for our own good. Many of us. Too smart for our own good. And then we mistake, intellectual knowledge, book knowledge, knowledge of concepts, knowledge of words, as really the heart has been changed, has been touched. I can say myself, particularly, maybe this is a sign of old age. Like now, I trust less and less, this intellectual, knowing a lot of things. In fact, to settle the issue of life and death, we don't need to know a lot. We just need to see very clearly. So more and more, reminding myself, and as a result, subjecting all of you to this, I say, you can keep reading, but if your reading is just to accumulate information and knowledge is not going to solve this big question of birth and death, this essential question of life and death. This essential question of life and death can only be settled when we take these teachings into our heart and let them illuminate the heart, illuminate our path. And so, in this one pithy verse called the Four Dharmas of Gampopa, the first one it says, may my mind, may my heart, may I, again, my mind, my heart, this is very technical Buddhist talk, right? May my mind, may my heart, basically, in plain English, may I turn to the Dharma. May my mind turn to the Dharma. So the first step is that. May I turn to the Dharma. And second one, may the Dharma become the path. And so the first one is, yes, your mind, your attention, your interest is turned to the Dharma. But then the Dharma needs to become your path, your method. If the Dharma doesn't become your path or your method, then all you have is a lot of, in the old days it used to be like all the maps from, AA, stacks of them, but you never get anywhere, You're just collecting all that. And now it's having all kind of GPS, but you never actually go. So the next is, may the Dharma become my path, become my method. A path is basically method. May it lead the way. May my way open up, according to the guidance of Dharma. So these are the first two Dharmas. And it's really important. So then the second part of this, right? Same scenario, right? But instead, right, the first one it says, oh, those beloved sensual pleasures will be taken away from me, and I will be taken away from them. Right? But he doesn't grieve, isn't tormented, doesn't weep, beat his breast, or go delirious. Or when, oh, my beloved body will be taken away from me, and I'll be taken away from my body. But yet he doesn't grieve. Doesn't weep. Why? Because this I, right? This I, this me, is not defined by either the sensory experiences or the notion of this is me, this is what I am put here to do, these are the things I have to accomplish. No. So in a way, there is an I. It's just saying this I should not be defined by, should not be built with these unreliable things as its building blocks. And then the third, and in the first two, right? How you can be like that? Because you have abandoned. Abandoned, being tethered to sensuality. Abandoned, being tethered to body. And the third, this person has done what is good, has done what is skillful, has given protection to those in fear, has not done what is evil, savage, and cruel. And then comes down with a serious illness or disease, and the thought occurs to him, I have done what is good, have done what is skillful. So then he doesn't grieve. And I find this really interesting, the way the Buddha phrased it. Like, in this third one, right, he says, to the extent that there is a destination. Almost, right? Almost kind of agnostic about it. Yeah? Now, I don't think this is the Buddha himself being agnostic. He's saying that the person experiencing this may or may not even believe that there is something after this. But he's saying, but there's, even those who don't believe there is something, there is this suspicion. Wait, what if there is? And he said, and that is enough to torture you. It's sort of like when I was teaching religious studies in college, I remember some students, jokingly, they're like, so let's I have this right, and this is when we're teaching introduction to all religions, right? You have to cover a whole bunch of religions. And you're like, so, if the Buddhists are right, then even if I'm Christian, I'll be fine. But if the Christians are right and I'm Buddhist, I might be in trouble. I say, well, I guess you could be Christian on that basis, but I don't know if that will pass the test of being a Christian. So it's sort of based on that idea, you know, like, yeah, according to certain Christians, unless you confess Jesus as personal Savior, no matter how good you are, you're not going to make it, you know. You're not going to go to a good place after this, you know. Not all Christians believe this, but some, you know. Yeah, I guess, you know. So here it's almost saying, you know, even if you don't believe, you know, but when things become unstable, you know, it will come and haunt you. So don't be so confident. So this is especially good as an advice to those of us who now live in the post, you know, religion world, perhaps, you know, like, I don't believe in heaven and hell and all those things, you know. Don't be so cocky, you know, when things start falling apart, you know, then you're like, oh, I don't know. So it says, even on that basis, you know, it's intelligent to entertain the possibility. What if there is a destination? And it says, you know, then you have to deal with that. So it's almost, the Buddha is almost saying, you know, regardless if there is or there isn't, you will entertain that idea. So you better do something about it now. And not wait until when things are unstable, then you have no control at that point. So same with like the bigger idea of like Phowa, you can't wait until things become unstable that you start, you know, panicking. Chinese saying is like, you know, like in the last minute, you know, you grab onto Buddha's feet to take me. You know. So third is that. Yeah, and then the fourth type, then there is the case of the person who has no doubt or perplexity, who has arrived at certainty with regard to the true Dhamma. Then he comes down with serious illness, disease, but when he comes down with that, the thought occurs to him, I have no doubt or perplexity. I have arrived at certainty with regard to the true Dhamma. The true Dhamma is not the teachings of the Buddha per se. The teachings of the Buddha point to the true Dhamma. The teachings of the Buddha point to true reality. Reality of things. So it's with regards to that you need to have certainty. Again, mastering all the ins and outs of the Buddhists, you know, 3 of this, 7 of that, you know, 7 divided into 5 more parts. Certainty about that is not that helpful. It needs to be certainty about things as they are. And once we have some certainty about that, or to whatever degree of certainty we have about that, we will be settled. So for Phowa to be successful, we have to work on settling this one big issue of birth and death. Tara is laughing over there. All the demons are now subdued. Should we take a break? Yeah, good.
Almost hit my bathroom. Almost all of them.